Welcome to the Heart of Healthcare podcast. I'm Hallie Tecco.
And I'm Steve Krause. And every Monday, we bring you the latest in healthcare innovation as we sit down with entrepreneurs and industry experts.
So buckle up and join us as we figure out how to improve healthcare for all. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Heart of Healthcare podcast. I'm your host, Hallie Tecco. As you can tell, it is not Monday when we usually publish, but we still have an episode for you today. As we close out May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, I wanted to replay an episode from a few weeks ago on Closing Time, where Michael Esquivel and I talked to the Calm CEO, David Coe. I thought this was such an important conversation. I have so many thoughts on managing stress and our mental health that I really wanted to share this episode here on the Heart of Healthcare as well. I hope you enjoy.
David, thank you so much for being here with us.
And thank you for both having me here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, David, as you know, stress is a constant companion on an already demanding journey for founders, and we know the toll it takes on all of our mental health. So, David, how would you prioritize your mental health and nurture resilience to navigate the challenges that come with leading a company?
I often think about resilience in a couple of different ways, especially in the context of my own company, and then also as I talk to others about it as well. Part of it in our own company, we just actually had this conversation the other day with a number of teams across product and engineering, was just the fact that you have to let folks take risks. You have to let them understand that it's okay for things not to be successful and to learn from those mistakes along your way. And I think the learning part is really key to build better resilience as a company going forward. I often find, and there was a really great article that just came out on this recently. It's in the Financial Times that came out, and they talked about this not just for European countries, but I also think it extends to Asian countries as well, is that sometimes failure is looked upon, at times even like mental health, as something that's really negative. And so you can't build some of that resilience. And so that resilience becomes a little bit unhealthy. So it's really tied to failure, instead of saying, hey, how do we learn from some of our mistakes going forward?
Speaking of resilience, I know Michael and I both have the Aura Ring as well. I'm curious if you'd be willing, Michael, to share your resilience, and I'll share mine.
Anytime. I had a great one. You know, I'll be honest, I've been abstaining from alcohol for quite an extended period, and I have seen all of my readiness scores go up. I think last night on my Aura Ring, I had a 91 on readiness.
Incredible.
Wow.
And then 88 on sleep.
Wow.
And I only was in bed for 6 hours and 4 minutes. But I had deep sleep of an hour and 55 minutes and REM sleep of 2 hours and 12 minutes.
Well, I mean, those are at least from Aura's perspective, those are the sort of things that help your body build the resilience that it needs so that your mind has that sort of resilience. I mean, it's incredible how it really does align with stress levels too.
That's right. That's so well said. And even though, Michael, you showed some of those hours, not all those numbers are the same, right? Yeah. I mean, I think we can all say that sometimes people actually just look at the number, but the quality of that number varies dramatically, right? So you could, for example, have a drink at 11 o'clock at night, still have the same amount of hours, but your quality of sleep may be very different during that time, during that 6 hour time period. And so it's all those kind of things that we kind of input and learn over time with ourselves as well. Yeah. But I often feel like the Aura is great for the numbers and some of these sleep tracks, especially what you all are doing. I have it as well.
Okay, so what is your resilience? Can you share?
What's your readiness score, David?
What's your
It literally is it's all over the place.
Not to put you out. Yeah. You know, well, and that's the thing. It is directional. I mean, I think that's the most important thing, is that you're looking at your change over time.
Yeah, and you just learn. I actually would be curious with you all too. I know we're riffing here. It's like I have learned over time with devices like the Aura just how to manage. I'm a snacker. I'm a constant. I don't know about you. I am not.
Show you my drawer
disciplined
right
at
here.
night. I will snack.
My downfall, David, is that late night snack, right? Just as like everybody tells you, don't do it, and yet,
Right.
and yet we all do it. Yet there's whether it's that handful of M&Ms or the popcorn or whatever it is, it just does me in.
Right. And it's so easy to like have a late night glass of wine and then have a quick snack after it. And then you realize like, oh, wow, I may have gotten the same amount of hours, but that quality was very different.
Totally.
So it's just, I think a lot of these inputs are really good. And I often find outside of just some of the inputs, it's like, if you write some of them down, I often sometimes feel a little bit embarrassed. It's like, how many drinks did you have last night? And I'm like, oh my God, I have to answer that. And you realize like, that's a big number. And so so all of these things correlate together in our health, you know?
Well, it's funny on resilience, though, David, because I talk a lot about the placebo effect with the Aura Ring and the scores. And I also have the 8 sleep and that score. I'll wake up sometimes tired like I did this morning. I'm like, wow, I have a 91 readiness score. I must feel great. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I got the extra pep in my step and I'm fired up. And then other days I wake up, I'm like, I feel pretty good. Oh, I've got a 78 sleep score. Man, I feel terrible.
And 78 isn't that bad, though. But yeah.
No, it's still good by Aura standards. But you know, David, I don't know, Hallie, if you guys have that same placebo effect, driving how you feel. And my doctor challenged us, a doctor that David knows well and Hallie, you know well, challenged me not to look at it and just let the scores be what they are and see how I felt first before letting the score tell me how I should feel.
I mean, I think that's right. And I think, and I think every day kind of checking in with yourself and how you feel and what stress you dealt with, and how your body feels. Did you move your body? Did you rest your body? And checking in with yourself, I think is really important just to kind of take this conversation to the next level around stress, because resilience really stems from the stress that we deal with, in the day to day. And I don't have a stressful job anymore, but you both do. And you guys have both had long careers that have been high stress. What tools have you guys learned to better deal with that stress? Because the stress doesn't go away. So the thing my therapist always says, don't focus so much on removing the stress, but on more like cultivating you're never going to get to like inbox 0 with stressful things in your life, but you can add things that make you really happy. And so that's something that I kind of go into my life, even though I have a, low stress podcaster life now. But David and Michael would love to hear from you guys.
I don't believe that for a minute, David. For the record, this woman is everywhere. She's putting out content. She's attending.
But I have no one. But I have no one
just
reporting
so
to me or counting on me, and that, my friends, makes. That's it. I take him on a walk, and that's great. But it's so different from when I was managing teams. I crafted this life for myself because the biggest stress was when companies and people were dependent on me.
Absolutely, and it's interesting. I know Michael, you have this as well. We often get asked, because I work at a mental health company, and people will be like, are people stressed at Calm? And I am like, yeah, absolutely, they're stressed. I feel like it's not always a fair question to ask, can you eliminate stress from work? It's almost a better question to say, like, how can you handle it in a healthy way? How can you deal with stress in a healthy way? And I'll give you an example. When I was younger and I was in banking, I didn't handle stress in a very healthy way. When I found myself under stressful situations, my outlet to deal with stress on a very personal note was just to go start smoking. And that was my vice. And, it took me a while. I haven't done it in 23 plus
years. Good for you, David. Woo. That's awesome.
Yeah. Now I have different cues, right? So now I've learned over time that when I feel stressed, and the way I handle it is not by binge eating or going to look for alcohol or going to look for certain vices that I know that are unhealthy for me. I look for things that are more healthy options, meaning like I may just, take a beat I may go take a walk. I may kind of recognize cues that say like, hey, I may not be the most pleasant person to be around right now because I'm not handling the stress in the most, kind of healthy fashion for myself or my teammates. And so I think there's different kind of ways to manage stress going forward, but we just have to recognize it's around us, especially in the jobs that we're in today. And I think that speaks for most people across the US and across the world today, that stress persists. It's just how we handle it in a healthy fashion.
Yeah, that's a masterclass set of guidance there, David. And for me, I have found, and it's not the cue that people turn to necessarily, but for me, it's every morning I love to exercise. For me, getting on that treadmill or using the Peloton or getting on the tonal and doing a strength training workout for 50 to 60 minutes just feels so good when I'm done. I'm exhausted sometimes when I get in to the gym and just to sweat it out and to just forget about everything because you're so focused in the moment of, can I just get through this? That it gives your mind just a moment of just release, of not thinking about all the stresses that we're all navigating in our careers and our lives. In the broader world, we're seeing it's just such a difficult, ugly time right now in so many places. It's just a little reprieve. So I like to joke that's my therapist every morning, somewhere between 6 and 6:30, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, I think one thing that was really pivotal for me in managing stress is recognizing that stress often just stems from fears. And in the startup environment, there's a lot of uncertainty, and the unknown is inherently scary. The lack of control, the lack of predictability, especially for A-types who like to kind of plan things out meticulously.
You don't know any A-types around here,
right?
Allie. What are you talking about?
And we were able to do that for our entire lives until kind of the real world, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And so I think, trying to understand, well, what is it that I'm afraid of? Am I afraid of getting fired? Am I afraid of my company tanking? Am I afraid of what is it that is releasing this fight or flight response in our brains? And that's helped me a lot. And just kind of being okay with learning to be okay with whatever the path will be, whatever happens, whether it is, our intended outcome or not, just learning to kind of come to peace with that at work, in our own personal life, has helped me. Just let's get to the root of it. Stress is based on fear. What is my fear?
Love that.
So well said.
It's funny because on the flip side, like everything in life, there's the mirror to that, which is that fear drives a lot of us, right? That motivation to overcome whatever that fear is, and is part of one of the vital ingredients, I think, for many of us, not everybody, but for many of us to succeed. And so, trying to find that right balance. When I was privileged to be elected a partner here at Fenwick and West over a decade ago and counting, one of the comments that a very senior, now retired partner mentioned to me is, Michael, as you get more senior in your career as an outside counsel, you get paid to stress. That is what you're not going to be doing the financing docs and managing that. You're going to be dealing with the big strategic headaches and problems and the big stuff where it really, in many cases, in my line of work, it is the bet the company kind of matter or issue or transaction or case. And so figuring out how to manage that. And David, I've admired over, having known you now for many years and worked together hand in hand as we have at Calm. It is amazing that every time I see you come in with a smile, you have this demeanor and approach. I can only imagine what's going on in your head, but you take a really positive attitude. And I think there's a secret sauce element about you. And so I'd love to help us get behind that curtain, get in your head a little bit. Tell us a little bit about how you're able to have that positive energy in every interaction, I've ever had with you. There always has that positive vibe coming from you. And I know every moment is not positive for you.
No, not every moment is positive. But I do think if you start with a positive disposition, I do think today in corporate America, we see it just in the numbers alone. These are some of the most stressful times We see it in not only, kind of as Hallie would tell you, like healthcare numbers alone, cost to the systems that are happening with the healthcare system, employers, our job, just day-to-day living. It's just very stressful times. And you couple that now with what you've all talked before on your successful podcast about, like just work-life balance and just remote work, for example, as well. All COVID, all of this is just compounded. And so it's a different type of, I would say, just motion for many of us today, hybrid work environments and all that. So it does add to just work stress and just because it is a different motion for so many of us today than it was before. We're not always all together. We're not always seeing each other. We have these kind of very confined moments during Zoom. I think for myself, what I've tried to do that has changed, I feel a lot, is to listen a lot more, is to come in and not speak at you, but is to hear what you're saying and also be prepared for that response. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I think a lot of times we walk into and ask questions where you may not want that full response. So an example of that is I may say to you, "How are you feeling?" And I say this to my own kids, and they'll say, "Fine." And sometimes that's all I want them to say, because I'm not prepared to sit down with them for an hour when they say, "I'm not doing so well." And they start to go into all the things that are happening when I ask them, "How are you really doing?" And all of a sudden the real answer comes out. But then I have to be prepared for that real answer where it's like, okay, now we're going to sit here and it's going to disrupt a lot that's happening in your day to day, because I wasn't really asking you how you're doing. I wanted that short snippet of a response that says you're fine. I do think right now today, and when you're asking me on a personal note, how I think about things, it's around listening and being more present. And it's something I've had to work at as times have changed. And it's just helped me with employee relations. It's helped me on a personal note. It's helped me with my own teenage daughters who are 16 and 13, where I don't have all this time with them. So when I do have a little bit of time and they want to really tell me something, I'm like, oh my God, I got to be really present. Yeah. Because if I'm not, they're not going to share more with me going forward. So I know I'm digressing here, but I just want to let you know like how I'm feeling in the moment. This is coming off hot of a conversation I had with my daughter the other day when I asked this, and I was in the middle of a few things and I was like, "How are you doing?" And she was like, "I'm doing fine." And I looked at her and I'm like, "You're not really doing fine." I had to go to a dinner and everything got delayed because she wasn't doing fine in the moment.
It's actually one of my least favorite questions from people that aren't like immediately close friends and family. Where people are like, "How are you doing, Hallie?" And I'm like, kind of shitty. Like, leave me alone. You know what I mean? It's such a loaded question. Like, I'm not going to trauma dump on you, but I also don't want to be like, "I'm great," And so I feel like I love that you brought that exact example, because I feel like what a awesome question to give to someone that you know well and care about and have time to listen to. And what a crappy question to ask someone that you barely know in passing.
That's so true. Because if you're not ready for that response, right, you just nailed it, right? You're not really, and then don't ask the question. But if you really are ready for that question, like ask it, right? And put some meaning behind it, be thoughtful behind it, because you may need to spend more time on that question than you anticipated.
So, David, let's take that now and apply it to, here you are, CEO of Calm. When you go into these C-suite exec team meetings, are you mentally saying to yourself, "Look, I've got to be prepared for the response"? Or how do you mentally prepare so that, and I do want to get to the well-being of the team and get into a series of thoughts from you on that. But, how you react, David, as CEO is oftentimes going to be emulated by the rest of the team. So your demeanor, your approach, et cetera. And so, how do you prepare for these meetings? And then I'd love to, how do you prepare for all hands meetings, like from a mental health perspective?
Yeah, from a mental perspective, when I walk into a lot of these meetings, a lot of times I want to explain, a lot of times it's about explaining the why. I will just tell you. So I often find employees ask a lot of great questions. Mine in particular put a lot of questions in Slack. I tend to not gloss over those questions. So if I don't have them answered, I will make sure we kind of circle back to those questions to answer them in the next meeting. Or I'll put them in Slack to make sure they feel that there's a loop. I often feel like, when we ask, when employees ask questions, just because we're remote first right now with some hybrid areas that you can go into here in the Bay Area, building ones in New York and other areas. To walk into a lot of these meetings, you just have to be prepared to answer the questions around why and be thoughtful around that. It helps me to be in the right mindset. And I often try to walk in their shoes to say, like, well, what are they dealing with? What are some of the meanings behind some of these questions that they're asking? And they can range from strategy all the way down to like house compensation, all the way down to new types of formats. You're asking me something that's really hot off the press. I sat with my employees at a town hall yesterday where we had conversations around benefits. And I realized that in the moment, while it may feel, and I said this to my leadership team, that employees are asking for more, we're not explaining to them, as I talked about in our town hall yesterday, what are the benefits that we offer today? What are the benefits that are actually being utilized? And if there's benefits that aren't being used, maybe we should replace them with some of the things that people are asking for. So that's like an example of things that sometimes, instead of going to a place that assumes bad intent, let's start with the notion of positive intent. Let's start with the notion that that whether you're on leadership team or the broader employee, that you're starting from positive intent. Let's answer the question of why, and then let's explain. Let's make a decision, and then let's all back that decision. And what I find sometimes is that we don't assume a positive intent. That leads to very kind of like you don't trust folks ultimately. And that's not really the culture that you want to build. And I think if you are very transparent, you are accountable to your decisions, it will build the right types of trust and the right type of culture you may want to build as a company.
On just that note, how do you separate making sure that employees and your team have the resources to manage stress and their mental health without like knowing too much, right? Like people need to be able to have their private lives. They need to be able to, share or not share things that are going on, breakups, deaths in the family, miscarriages, all sorts of things that are going on that are non-work related, but impact your work. What tips do you have for leaders to ensure that they're giving people their privacy and space and support at the same time?
That's such a great question, Hallie. And what I would tell you is like a lot of that starts with our workforce training. Think about how much today that we're asking our managers to go do. I often tell people like, there's a lot that you're asking of our teams to go do, not just in their day-to-day jobs, but you're also asking them to be almost like their therapists at times. And so we have to train them to answer those questions thoughtfully and also defer to others who may answer them better. Because you may not be the one that should be answering some of these questions on a personal front. Some of them actually should be moved to your HR teams or others. And so what I often find, there's a little bit of balance, but that starts with some of the workforce training that we do. So we do a lot of things around talking to companies around workforce training. We do a lot of things about telling them like, here's how you can use apps. Here's how you can use some of your EAP services. Here's are some of your ways you can use coaching. Here's how some of the ways we can train our managers in these situations and then defer to others when we can't answer some of those questions. And so I do think there's a lot of workforce training. I think we all recognize that, mental health is it's a big thing right now that's on many benefit managers' minds today in the workplace. We all want healthier and happy workforces. We all recognize that if we do that, they could be more productive. We all recognize that there's a cost if our workforce is not productive. And so how do you have a more productive workforce? These are all questions that kind of bleed into that. And it's not just really one thing. I often tell people, many of these things have to come together and work in tandem.
What about for companies that don't have an HR department, where you are the HR department, and you don't have tons of great benefits? What can those sort of small businesses do?
Yeah, and that's great too. And so there's a ton of stuff that folks offer, obviously online. There's a ton of stuff that you can go to in terms of self-directed apps that are out there today. I do think that's getting a lot better than it was before. I often tell people, like, we offer a ton of services, obviously, for free as well. I know many companies do that too. And I think some of this is like, you start to feel like you have to, run all positions. I certainly have been there with you when, you start a company and it's just like 1, 2, or 3 individuals. And then all of a sudden you have 10 and then you have 20 and there is no HR department. You are the HR department as the founder or leadership, of the company. And that's when I think it's really critical to go out there and actually see services you can kind of
like
pull
what?
down.
Can you give some
I know for myself. Yeah. Well, Calm definitely is one. I will tell you, even from a competitive, I tell people all the time, if you can't find the stuff that you're looking for at Calm, I will tell you, there's lots of other places you can look as well. So I've said to folks, hey, you can go to Headspace. I've said to folks, if you can't find that, you can go to other sites as well. And the ecosystem is so large for the number of people that are out there. There are, the cost of mental health to the system over the next, by 2030, we talk about it in, north of 16 trillion. We talk every year about the cost of mental health to the system. That's over 100 billion a year to employers and payers in the system of mental health. I often say, like, one company alone can't solve these things. It's got to be many companies working together. We're not large enough, even though people will look to us and say, oh my God, you guys are a large company. I'd be like, that's true. Yes, we are a company that I'm very proud to say that we've had over hundreds of millions of people who have touched the product. But that pales into the comparison of the number of people who've raised their hands and said, I need help. And so I do think it's a global issue. And so whether you're a solo, business that says, okay, I could go to Calm and need help, or you're a large Fortune 10 company or 50 company saying, I need help as well, I think this is something that we need to address. And the problem is just getting worse right now.
One thing I always tell folks that are leading, small companies is to actually so first of all, take care of yourself, but let everyone see you taking care of yourself. Put therapy on your calendar. I do this all the time. Right? I see my therapist and I put it on my calendar. Everybody can see I'm at therapy this time, put like that you're going to your workout class. Like, don't just take care of yourself, but use that as a way to lead others and let others know that it's like super cool and accepted at this organization that we take time to do what we do to manage our own health and wellness.
I love that. I mean, you are an exceptional leader. And you lead by example. And that's exactly what you have to do from the top. And this culture starts at the top. We could put words on a page, but if you don't follow those words that you're promoting, nobody else will, right? That's that trickle down effect. And so, I do think it's so important what you just said, where it has to start at the top, because leadership does start at the top.
Yeah. Well, I know Michael works out at 5 a.m. every morning, but I still am not inspired to do that. Maybe
that is
someday.
True, Michael. You are leading, exemplary physical.
Seriously.
The only time I have to myself. But David and Hal, you guys really hit on something that I think is important, because there used to be, at least when I started my legal career back in 2000 in particular, there was this stigma, right? With like, you've got to be working all the time, 100 hours a week, and there is no time for personal time. Like, that was seen as a negative. And now I oftentimes wonder, is the mental health crisis getting worse, or are we finally just being honest and open and transparent with ourselves that this problem has been there forever?
for giving ourselves the chance to reflect on how stressful it is.
Yeah. So David, to me and Hallie, this is just it's just such an important topic, and it has, thanks to great companies like Calm, we have made incredible strides at destigmatizing a lot of these mental health issues, but there's still a long way to go. And David, just reaction to you to that, and how do we get there so that we can avoid some of the horrific outcomes that we've seen, largely driven by this mental health crisis that, again, I submit to you has been here all along. It's just now we're getting better at talking about it, better at measuring it maybe, and certainly better at just being transparent about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you just touched upon about the transparency and talking about it is a great first step. I would tell you, like, as we look at the numbers across the world, it's not equal. My parents live in Korea, and when I go back to Korea, I would tell you those are some of the places where we see the lowest usage and discussion of mental health. It is still seen as somewhat shameful to have a conversation and to say I have mental health issues. There's an absolute stigma to it that is still there. And so while that here, as I love the fact that we're having a dialogue around mental health, and that dialogue is finally at a stage where we can be much more open about it. I think we also have to recognize there are parts of the world where that dialogue is not as fluid as what we're having here today. And if we were having this conversation, and I asked this actually at a roundtable that I was at in Korea, I was like, why does it take a number of actors or singers committing suicide at a very young age for us to finally have this conversation that there's a real problem here? And I hope as we start to have this dialogue, we're not going to be talking about the one-off, some of these tragic events that are happening. We can create this as more of the norm, and to have an open conversation around what's happening. And that's where it's, but there's other parts of the world, as we all know, where the conversation is happening, and especially here in the US, and it is becoming a lot more open. My kids are having conversations, and I'm actually glad. They may not use the term in the right way at times or overuse it. But at least they feel comfortable enough to say it's not shameful to talk about their mental health. And to say when they need some alone time, or just, or to recognize some cues that maybe some of the things they're doing, looking at social media, is causing them to be a little bit more stressed out, and it's causing them to feel a little bit worse about themselves, not a little bit better about themselves. I think it's just cueing, and they're understanding those things as they get older now. And there's different stresses they're going through that I didn't grow up with, so I don't quite understand all that, in terms of those cues. So I think as we start to see all these things that are happening all around us, I often tell people, like, this is something that is something that's just kind of growing, that we're going to have to keep having conversations around with folks like yourself and others to get the word out, and to say it's okay to have these conversations. I mean, I love what Hallie just said about, like, just great putting it on her calendar. I mean, how amazing is that? I mean, like, I literally I don't do that, and I should do that. And I feel like I should do it right now, because that says it's okay, right? If your leader says it's okay, then it's okay, right? Like, it's not shameful. And I just love the fact that you shared that, and we're so open about that. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, therapy's been life-changing for me. I love it. Most health plans cover it. So I always tell people, like, you have no excuse. If you have health insurance, it likely covers talk therapy. Go do it now. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Yeah. Is there just one message you'd really love to get across to our listeners?
Yeah, I was telling someone, I hope at some point it's not just about a day or a month. I hope it's a conversation that's normalized, so we're having it all throughout the year. I do think it's always great that it's promoted during this month, and there's a lot of activity around it. I would love for that activity to continue throughout the year. And I often challenge my own team, and I'd ask your listeners as well. that we all band together. So it's not just about Mental Health Awareness Day. It's not just about Mental Health Awareness Month. It's just something we recognize that's around us. And how do we make it better for the people around us going forward? How do we become more thoughtful listeners? How do we become more present? How do we say it's okay to reach out to people and to help people in need? And so I just would love for us to make the dialogue more normalized. And this is not just on a US basis, but a global basis. And I hope it becomes something that we can talk about all throughout the year.
This was such an important conversation. And I hope that our listeners are going to go to therapy and put it on their calendar.
Yeah, put it on your calendar. I mean, follow your lead, right? This is just such an amazing podcast. Thank you for doing this. It's so needed. I appreciate you having me on. I will continue to listen to you all religiously going forward.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of Healthcare. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please leave a rating and review, and don't forget to subscribe. The Heart of Healthcare is produced by Hallie Tecco and Steve Kraus. The show is engineered, edited, and mixed by Kyle Moore. Visit our website, heartofhealthcarepodcast.com, for show notes and episode details.